Hello, everyone, and welcome to this. Listen, this is going to be an important one. Information Week Fast Chat, sponsored by Microsoft. I am Bill Clayman, co-founder and CEO of Apollo.us and one of the contributing editors here at Information Week. And joining me today, very important person, is going to be teaching us a lot, Yuri Diogenes, Principal PM Manager at CXC Defender for Cloud team at Microsoft. Probably one of my favorite titles I've ever had. Yuri, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Bill.
It's a pleasure. We're literally going to dive into this conversation immediately. That's why it's called a fast chat. All right. I'm lucky. I'm not just like a talking head, which I guess I am, but I've had the experience in working with a lot of different types of VARs and partners to actually architect and design a lot of different types of cloud, hybrid, and of course, multi-cloud as well. And it's honestly probably one of the more dominant architectures that we're seeing right now for a lot of enterprises to adopt. Full stop. There are some, let's be honest, there's some challenges that are associated with this, some very common ones, specifically around security. And the more complex and the larger your multi-cloud, the more challenging it is to optimize a true security posture. That is what we're going to be diving into, and that is our conversation. Super important. Get off your Amazon shopping list and let's go ahead and listen to Yuri, because we're going to ask the first question and dive right into this thing. I'm really curious. You are boots on the ground. Literally, your team is called the Defender for Cloud. So what are some of the biggest security risks facing multi-cloud environments, especially today?
Well, Bill, I love that you started with this question because business and organization as a whole, they are struggling really to be able to understand what's happening in their environment when it comes to what is being provisioning, what is being pushed into the cloud, which repositories they have in their company. And it becomes even more challenged because each cloud provider has different standards. Developers, many times they do not have visibility about security practice. So there is a huge gap between dev and cloud administrators when it comes to policies and everything. So it's really concerned. So to give an idea, and this data is coming from the Microsoft multi-cloud report. Just in 2023, for example, 65% of code repositories contain source code vulnerabilities, which remain in the code for an average of 58 days. So that's huge, which means that there are vulnerabilities in the code that has been pushed to the cloud and now is available for threat actors to exploit. So the visibility, the end-to-end visibility of the entire full cycle is very challenging. It's very challenging, and this is one of the main concerns. And the other one is around identity. And there are too many identities and there are over-provisioned. So another data, very interesting here, just 2% of the permissions that were granted were used last year. For example, 98% were permission that no user actually took advantage of. So there's over provision. So this over provision opens the door for threat actors to exploit those over provisions identities, which is huge. So having the visibility of the identities and what those identities are capable of doing, and then understand if they are actually doing what they are supposed to do is super important. And this is a gap that many organizations, they really don't have that. With just one more important data, organizations face 59 data security incidents each year, which is an average of 74% of the organizations that were interviewed in this report. So it's really big numbers, kind of scary numbers, but there is a way to prevent that. And I think that this is our segue for the next question.
I think what you're nailing is perfect. I took some notes about what you're talking about. I remember doing a report for Cisco actually a while back, and that was fascinating because what they found, Yuri, is that you've got this great metric, like 59 data security incidents each year, and 74% of organizations experience at least one data breach. The crazy impact is that 100% of all organizations will experience some type of security incident. whether it results or a breach or not. That's entirely up to you and the conversation that we're having. The one other really important point that you brought up was 65% of code repositories had those source vulnerabilities that were in the code for an average of 59 days. Ladies and gentlemen listening, this is understanding that data is stolen in hours, not days. So having those vulnerabilities is really, really scary. And like you said, Yuri, listen, I've got the $1 million question. What's preventing companies from mitigating this?
Well, what's happened over the years is that there was this approach to do what is called the best in breed, which means that companies, they were acquiring software solutions for one silo only, one pillar. For example, vulnerability assessment. Oh, I want to get the best vulnerability assessment in the market. Boom, they purchase that, and now they have that solution. They are married to that solution, but that solution is isolated because now they need the best CSPM in the market, cloud security posture management. Oh, this is the best one. So they have that mindset of having probably multiple vendors, best in breed for each segment, but they were not talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So the insights generated by the CSPM were not shared with the vulnerability assessment, was not shared with the cloud entitlement management, CAN, right? And this creates a problem to manage everything in different dashboards is a nightmare. It increased the total cost of ownership because now you have to basically train all your workforce in different products, understand different solutions, and worse, those solutions, they don't talk to each other, right? So you never have the real possibility of what the threat actor can do, because it's not only about exploiting one vulnerability, it's about what's next, because exploiting one vulnerability can be just the entry door. Where do I go from there? What are the possibilities when it comes to lateral movements? And that's something that having best in breed isolated solutions will never give it to you, the whole end to end from code all the way to runtime. It's just not possible because they are fully isolated.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think what we're trying to talk about here is how do we reduce that complexity, increase that visibility, right? And there's a lot of tools, Yuri, out there. There's different types of cloud security tools, and everybody listening, you're about to learn a new acronym. Not that our technology space has enough acronyms, but you're going to learn another one right now. It's actually called CNAPP, right? So it's Cloud Native Application Protection Platform, and some would argue that it's not so much of a tool set, but rather a strategy and a mindset alongside the tools that you deploy. But I have a very direct question for you. This is one of the first times I'm hearing about CNAPP. What is different about that from existing cloud security tools?
Yeah, so what happened was historically, when it comes to cloud security, one of the first initiatives that started to really take off was cloud security posture management. And I've been working in this field of cloud security since 2014, basically, when we start the journey to have some sort of visibility. One of the first tools that we released was in 2015, for example, the Azure Security Center. And the idea was to have visibility across all the workloads. But as the environments continue to grow, the types of workload, the threat landscape, different tools were starting to pop up to manage different areas. One tool just for cloud workload protection, one tool just for posture management, and so on. So what happened is around 2021, 2020 or 2021, in between, Gartner actually create this coin term called CNAPP, and it create this architecture diagram of the components that must be present for a solution to be considered a CNAPP. So there are many elements that needs to be present in this architecture so that the solution can be considered a CNAPP. Is an aggregation, and that's why you said is a mindset, and it could be, but in reality can be a solution that contains a CSPM, contains a CAN, contains cloud workload protections, contains DevOps security, right? Container security, all the workloads protection, and is also able to scan all the artifacts that the customer has on their environment, obtain the necessary insights, and then empower users to prioritize what is really important to them, to their environment. Because what happens in the past, we used to have basically a benchmark. I'll run all your workloads through this benchmark and then start to remediate the recommendations based on the benchmark.
Mm-hmm.
Benchmark is great. CIS, NIST, all those things are important from the hardening perspective, but they don't give the customization they are not tailored for your own environment, right? Because my environment, I have some assets that are important to me, and maybe your benchmark doesn't take in consideration that. So the capacity to say this is an asset that is important and you have to take into consideration is something very unique from the Synapse standpoint. And the share of information. So whatever I discover on the standpoint of security insights, when I'm scanning, for example, a container or a storage account, I'm able to use this data and cross information, not only between those workloads, but also run through threat intelligence and all to understand the attack vectors and then create what we call the attack path, which is the potential scenario of an attack. Now, this is super powerful because I'm giving you what can happen if you do not remediate a specific vulnerability in your environment, right? It's not only that one dimension look at the vulnerabilities and the workloads, but what can happen if the threat actor exploit this vulnerability and then move laterally across different workloads until it reaches maybe a database or a storage account that has PII. So now I have the full view of the potential attack and really which assets are at risk. And this is something that only Synapse can do from the posture management perspective.
Wow. I tried to type some notes as you were discussing this because you actually gave me a really clear perspective on this. And correct me if I'm wrong. I actually have a little bit of a follow-up question here. I'm going to throw you a curveball, Yuri. So what you're describing basically is the ability in this multi-cloud architecture to basically create an environment, a platform, a structure offering deeper, more contextualized alerts, prioritized really on the risk to not just the organization, but specific pieces of technology. Yuri, that's really cool, man. And that's you're probably saving some sleepless nights. Here's my follow-up. I'm really curious about this. So how does AI integrate into this? How does AI integrate into getting to faster threat detection and in the important one like remediation?
Yeah, this is not only the trend but the necessity, right? Because threat actors will also leverage AI. So defenders, they need to be one step ahead to also leverage AI to improve not only the speed, because it's not only about threat detection, right? The whole point of Synapse is to ensure that you improve your overall posture, secure posture, which is a preventative work. If you are only focused on threat detection, you are doing reactive work. So you need to make sure that you close all the doors, that you do all your secure hygiene, and then have a good plan to respond to potential threats based on a set of threat detections that were tailored for different workloads. So AI fits into those buckets of how can AI, for example, help cloud administrator to quickly identify what is really at risk on their environment and allow cloud administrators, for example, to interact with a natural language and ask, what are the risks of my environment? What are the options that I have to remediate? So you start interacting in a natural language, asking those questions about what is important to them to remediate. Because in large organizations, there will be hundreds of security recommendations, literally hundreds of security recommendations to remediate. They need to take actions, right, to understand what is more important, critical for them to work on. So there is the whole preventative help in navigating through the different recommendations and understand what needs to be done. And there is also the remediation part, which is in a multi-cloud, there are different types of codes, there are different types of language. So many times the cloud administrator may not have the necessary skill to create an automation to deploy something at scale. For example, if I need to remediate a lot of workloads, how can I do this at scale? So AI will play a big role to write that script and to write that automation, right? Interacting with AI and asking, I have these recommendations to remediate. Can you help me create a script to remediate at scale? And then AI, boom, creates that for you. So that's super powerful because it really helps to expedite a lot of our remediations at scale, and also give you the right insights when it comes to prioritization of what needs to be remediated on the environment. So those are the two areas within the Synapse story. And of course, it will have a role in threat detections, be more predictable, understand patterns of behaviors and how to create things, secure controls that can prevent certain type of attacks. Behind the scenes, the analytics that are created to detect different threat actors can also leverage AI. So you're gonna play with AI from this perspective of posture management as well as threat detection.
Yuri, I'm going to be honest with you. I could probably spend a full hour talking about that with you, because what I think you described right now is so critical. Everybody listening, make sure you heard what Yuri said. For the first time ever, we can interact with our data, ask it questions to become more intelligent, how we can secure these ecosystems. This is not something we could do in the past. Yuri, you'll love this. I just recorded a keynote address for a Friday event, and it was around security. And check this out. We talked about AI in security, not just for defense, but for offense. And you nailed it. Hey, AI security architecture, here's my architecture for multi-cloud storage or whatever. What vulnerabilities do you see? How would you attack me if you were the bad guy? And so all of a sudden you have this ally, an AI ally that can help you with defense as well as offense, which, to be honest, kind of brings us to the really important next question. Okay. All right, Yuri. Okay. Let's get you stretched out a little bit. Get your crystal ball. I don't know where it is on your desk. I usually have mine somewhere nearby. We're gonna look at your, or if you have like an 8-ball, you can shake it and that's gonna be your answer too. Totally okay. I know this is the hardest question I'm gonna ask you, to be honest, right? We're looking to look in the future together, and this is kind of the fun part as well, right? As inevitably cloud security continues to evolve, right? Without a doubt. And these threat actors become more creative. They're not lone wolves. They're trading intellectual property. They're using sometimes the same tools that we are. What future threats can organizations start preparing for right now?
So if you think about, we were talking about AI, there is a lot of gray areas when it comes to developing applications, Gen AI applications. So one of the things that is super important nowadays to start right away is to ensure that you have visibility across your Gen AI apps. We are starting a new journey from this new workload, so you better protect from the get-go. And this is something that is starting to get baked into the Synapse. It's a whole Synapse strategy. It's also Gen AI posture management security. How can I understand if my developers are really doing the right thing when it comes to Gen AI? So this is the point of view for the posture management. Mm-hmm. Having this visibility is important. Providing those secure best practices to the developers so that they can start developing secure code from the get-go is super important, but also having threat detection. Is there any threat actor trying to do any harm to my Gen AI applications, taking advantage of my Gen AI applications? So there is a new set of threats when it comes to Gen AI apps that needs to be detected, so that you not only work on the preventative posture management, but also the reactive manner. Because as we all know from the the principles of zero trust, we always have to assume breach, which means that we have to assume that the threat is already inside and is going to do something. You have to respond fast. So having the visibility for threat actors that are trying to break into Gen AI applications is super important. And this is a journey that you can start now with visibility, understand what's going on in the environment, hardening this environment, provide best practice to the developers.
Oh, I'm going to exhale just because of how important all of that is. And I think for some folks listening, this might be new. Maybe they're just touching the waters of generative AI right now. You're going to be a generative AI user. In fact, everyone listening to this fast chat has become a user of generative AI, because if you've gone to your favorite search engine recently, it's no longer a blue link, is it? It's now a generative AI response. So what Yuri's talking about here is paramount to begin that security journey today. Wow, I've learned so much. I really have. I actually took a whole bunch of notes. Thank you, Yuri. And obviously, we actually got a special little present for everybody. Yuri was kind enough to share an ebook specifically on this topic. Pretty sure the link is going to be right below. You can check it out. So to learn more, click that link, download this ebook. It's implementing a cloud-native application protection platform strategy, not just the technology solutions, but the actual strategy behind it. And you can always visit Microsoft.com to learn more. Until next time, Yuri, thanks for hanging out with us. This was super informative. A big thank you to Microsoft for sponsoring this event. And as always, stay connected and never stop learning. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.